Okay, hey everybody. This is Shira Lincoln Schaps from the Layers Project magazine. We're having some tech issues, so we decided just to record our conversation and upload it directly to Facebook. You know, we're having this issue in Israel where everybody is on the internet at the exact same time, so everybody's bandwidth is going crazy. So you know what, we're just gonna roll with it. Anyway, I want to introduce you to our wonderful guest today. We have here Tanya Prochko from Get Help Israel, who is here to talk to us about toxic positivity and how to detox from it. So first, Tanya, please introduce yourself. Tell us all about the amazing work that Get Help Israel does.
For the third time. Okay, yay for tech issues. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Tanya Prochko, the founder and director of Get Help Israel. I'm also a psychotherapist who made Aliyah about almost 8 years ago, who had a really hard time figuring out how to work here within the system here. So I recognized that there was a gap for Olim in the mental health field. And I also recognized that there was a gap for the actual clients who are seeking mental health services. So I started Get Help Israel as a way to enable Olim to access qualified therapists at their fingertips from the comfort of their home. So what we have is the Israel Association of Mental Health Professionals, which at the moment is 250 mental health professionals in Israel throughout the country who have various specialties, ranging from social workers to psychiatrists to psychologists to addiction specialists, sex therapists, everybody that is in the mental health field who's available to work privately. We also have subsidized services through organizations, support groups, information on navigating the mental health system. So everything related to finding mental health help is available at Get Help Israel for English speakers in Israel. That's GHI in short.
And as I said before, I'll say it again because it's still true. As a new Ole, I so much appreciate the work that you're doing. It is very difficult to find your supermarket or a bank, let alone mental health resources, and any kind of transition definitely is benefited from support, and life here in Israel can be difficult, but life anywhere can be difficult, and we all could benefit from having access to our mental health providers. And so it's a tremendous service that you're doing. So I just want to.
And you never know how valuable it is until you need it. So that's really, it's one of those situations where when you need a therapist or you need to find a facility to admit a loved one, you don't want to start figuring it out then.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? You just want to know exactly where you're going, where you trust to find it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited for our conversation today. I think that what we're going to talk about is extremely important and pertinent because I think a lot of people are feeling this way. Last week I wrote an essay where I kind of expressed how I felt about toxic positivity and how it was affecting my life, and it seemed like a lot of people were agreeing with me. So I'm here to bring this amazing clinician on to talk about what is toxic positivity, breaking it down, and kind of how do we detox from it? How do we learn to block out the voices that are very stressful to us? So first off, let's talk about what the difference is between toxic positivity and positivity, because positivity is a wonderful thing. I think that's an incredible resource to us during this pandemic. So just talk to us about what the benefits are of positivity during a high stress moment.
So we know that there's a lot of research that supports being positive, right? So we're not dismissing the importance and the value of being positive. There's positive psychology. There is CBT that teaches us how to, kind of be more focused on reality and not let our thoughts kind of wander into very dark places. So we know that positive thinking is effective. Sometimes that positivity can be toxic. And I guess this is the importance of what we're talking about here is we want to be able to kind of hone in on what is it about the toxic part that we want to stay away from. And so let's define that. Let's define what is toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is the focus on the positive in a way that can be dismissive or invalidating of a person's emotional experience. It's pushed upon a person in a moment when they're feeling a negative emotion as a way of like, let's move away from the negative and move towards the positive. And that can be really, really toxic. Why? We know that yeah?
No, tell us why.
All of our emotions are important. There is no rating on which emotions are better than others. There is a rating on which ones feel better, right? We appreciate and enjoy the positive emotions much more so than the ones that are uncomfortable for us. But all of our emotions are important, and they all communicate something to us. So when we are pushing away the negative ones and masking them with the positive ones, like, and I guess it's important for us to give a couple of examples of what that toxic positivity looks like. If, at least you have your health, right? Like, if we're going to talk about Corona times, like, let's be grateful that we have all of our loved ones together, or, things like that.
At least more time with our family.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that we don't really know what goes on in someone's home. And when we are projecting what we think is better for them, at least, when you start a sentence with "at least," it gets a little complicated because we don't.
Yeah, exactly. So I like to kind of think of it like, I like visuals, right? So if we kind of think about, something that, let's say there's a stain on your floor. I'm like looking at my floor right now. You have a stain on your floor and you don't want it to show. So you put a piece of furniture on it. You didn't get rid of the stain. You're covering it up. That stain is there. But with emotions, when we're suppressing them and we're kind of just not addressing a real human experience, that's what we're talking about, they grow and they will find a way to voice themselves.
So what happens when somebody tells us to choose to be positive, as opposed to sitting with us in the space of the negative emotion that we're feeling?
Mm-hmm. So it can lead to feeling ashamed of what we're feeling judged, or feeling inadequate, or like a failure, like, oh, maybe I should be more productive, or maybe I should, like everyone else seems to be coping so well, why am I not? And so you feel kind of like, I'm inadequate. So it builds and builds these feelings, and it leads maybe to secrecy. Like, I don't want to really share with you that I'm not doing well because you seem to be doing great, and you're kind of feeding me with all this positive vibe stuff. So it kind of feels like you're forcing this positivity on me before I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
And that's not a good feeling.
Right. And listen, let's talk a little bit about the reality of what's going on right now, because I think that what we're seeing a lot in media or social media is this concept of toxic positivity. People are, saying things like, now is the perfect time to learn a new language. And now is the perfect time to write that novel that you've been meaning to write. And now, aren't you so happy that you have all this beautiful time with your kids, and are you so happy that your spouse, my husband travels for work, and people say to me, aren't you so happy that your husband doesn't travel anymore? And like, yeah, I'm happy that my husband doesn't travel right now, but
do you like notice when you're giving me these examples, notice what is in that message. They're projecting how they would feel.
Right. Or how they think that
they're basically telling you.
That or projecting that it would be healing for me to think this way. So when they say to me, aren't you glad that your husband isn't traveling right now? I think to myself, yes, I am grateful, but I'm also feeling anxious because there's a pandemic. And I'm also worried about my loved ones. And I'm also worried and stressed because my kids aren't in school and I don't want them to fall behind. So, like, you're taking something that you're trying to make it like that's going to be the thing. Why aren't you feeling that thing? Why aren't you feeling grateful for that thing? But have all these complicated negative emotions,
Also, sometimes it's not clear why we have certain negative emotions. Sometimes they're linked to some kind of past trauma or something that we're sensitive to. Okay, so it might not be as clear. So when we're not aware where that negative emotion is coming from and why it's so strong, we start to doubt, why is it there? And we start to judge ourselves for feeling it. So it becomes this like
right there in that nexus. That's where shame is born sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about the pandemic, right? So people all over the world are experiencing, you know, dealing with the reality of this, and it's going to come in lots of different forms. Some people are working, some people aren't working, some people have kids, some people don't have kids, some people have sick relatives and friends, and some people are dealing with grief and loss.
Mm-hmm. And also just like different dynamics of how people are in isolation or in quarantine, right? I have clients who are solo because they have adult children who don't live in the home anymore. They are either divorced or widowed, and they are solo. And what that feels like, you know, so somebody else might come and say, ah, must be nice. You just have all this quiet all day. You don't have the kids to deal with and you're whatever. But that feeling of loneliness that is described it's hard.
Very painful. And then,
You know, and then you have people who are with their full houses in small apartments or in you know, small spaces and not having their own space. And you have people who are working from home or people who are juggling their kids' online education. And that, by the way, is a full-time job in and of itself. Every parent will admit. So you have all these different things, and you have people who are in an abusive relationship where that where it's domestic violence or emotional abuse, where it's like it's getting worse because you don't have that you're always in each other's faces, and you have things like addiction or eating disorders and things that are kind of being exacerbated by this time. So you have a whole gamut
yeah,
of what people are experiencing.
mental health struggles, and you know, the general experience of juggling too many things with no boundaries, which I don't think was something that we expected, that kind of just like snuck up on us. I know for me,
Mm-hmm.
when this all started, I actually kind of had like a positive association with isolation at home, like with my family. Like things were calm. You know, everything halted in its tracks. Everything that I was working on, my husband was working on, the kids, everything just stopped. And then it was just the four of us in our home. And so we did enjoy time together, and we did have a bit more time for creativity. And people are having wonderful, holistic family or just, you know, positive experiences at home. People are experiencing a rebirth of creativity and enjoying a break from the rush of everyday life. So there is tremendous positive opportunity when the rest of the world kind of pauses. That being said, I think that in general, pandemic is pandemic. Pandemic means a widespread negative thing happening, an illness in this case, that's affecting the whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to utilize this time, or to assume that one must utilize this time right now in COVID, this isolation quarantine experience, for growth and for positivity solely, is not necessarily aligned with the reality of what it means to live in a pandemic. Meaning, like, I remember this was the first time I ever felt this way, but that first week, and when it was Shabbos, I was so grateful to have been able to go to the supermarket or to have food delivered to my home. Like, I wasn't sure that we'd be able to have food. I thought that we'd get locked out. And you know, that's because of the way that I grew up. I was lucky that that never happened to me before, but that was that first time that that ever happened to me, you know. And so people are worried about money. People are losing their jobs left and right, and that's really
I
serious.
think it's really important to address the concept of grief here,
Yes.
because this loss, we're all grieving different things. And again, it's so important to note that a loss doesn't have to be this huge. It doesn't have to be loss of life. It doesn't have to be loss of something massive. It can be any kind of loss, and that loss is different for each of us depending on what value that person puts on those things. It could be loss of independence. It could be loss of my personal space. It could be loss of, you know, normalcy or routine. And for different people, it has different impact. And so, you know, if you think about the stages of grief, you know, the 5 stages of grief, why does it work when we go through those stages, because we actually go through each of those emotions in totality. Like we feel it, and then we can move on to the next stage. And you know, it's not so black and white as to the order, but the point is that we are experiencing those stages of grief and feeling it. And so imagine if someone is grieving, and if we want to use the traditional grief of a loss of a human being, and then someone comes along and says, at least you have two other children, right? Like, I mean, obviously it's such a ridiculous example. Like if God forbid someone lost a child and someone comes along and says, but at least you have, right? Let's focus on the positive, and tomorrow's a brand new day, and whatever it is. Again, I'm using a very extreme example. I would hope there's no human being on this planet that would make that kind of statement. But I want to equate it in a similar way, that if someone is feeling a negative emotion and feeling something negative, that someone else comes along and says, look at the bright side, or try to think positively, what that would do to a person who is sitting here feeling something completely different that what someone else is trying to put upon them. It's harmful.
To speak to what you're saying, since you brought up grief, I was talking to Rachel Herkman, our clinical director of Layers, before this call, and she mentioned that, specifically that example, that, we look at the halachot of Avelut, and when we go to a Shiva house, when we sit down, we're supposed to stay silent until the mourner speaks, because the message of the halacha is that those who are in pain should lead the conversation. And there's something to be said, instead of, it's natural for humans to want to comfort each other. And I think that it is difficult to sit with someone who's in pain, because that pain touches pain within ourselves, and it's hard to open ourselves up to that. That being said, we want to comfort, but sometimes the answer is just to be with each other and to acknowledge that feeling, because that is the grieving process specific in that scenario. I saw a great cartoon today where there was this guy in a boat, like a rowboat, and there was like a storm raging all around him, just like one guy alone in a boat. And there was like a phone, like one of those like Motorola flip phones, like from like way back when. And it was open on the boat, and it said, like a little speech bubble came out, and it said, "This is the perfect time to start your novel." And that is the experience. That's toxic positivity in the time of COVID, where we to be cognizant of how the fear and the anxiety and the practical reality changes of life that have happened to us, things that have been taken away from us, things that have been added to our plates, how that's going to be affecting us on an energetic level. I mean, like physically, energetically, like it's exhausting. And on a brain space level, like it takes up a lot of space. I remember not the first week, but maybe the second and the third week, and Tanya, you can attest to this, I felt like a zombie, just because I just felt so lost. I just felt so like, what is happening in this world, and how am I meant to cope with this? I didn't have any answers. And I
remember you sent me a text that said, now what? Like there needs to be some kind of a solution. Like there needs to be something that we need to fill this space with, because that's just like, that's how we're used to thinking, right? Like I have this space, but it's very hard to kind of be aware of what else is taking up that space. But if you I'm going to give you, I'll give you an analogy. Yeah.
You had said to me at the time, oh, but Shira, but like you have your health, so like you don't need like whatever, like you're fine.
Who said this?
I'm saying, if you had said to me, if I said, now what, I'm in pain, and you said, well, you have your health, like everything is fine, but that's not what you said. You said, I don't know. And we were just in it together, and you didn't try to give me any answers, because there was no answers. And even when we think that there's answers, that wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to hear. I didn't want you to tell me what next. I didn't want you to say, okay, well, then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this. I just wanted you to be like, I hear you. You did. Yeah. So thank you. You're a good friend.
Thanks. I happen to know a thing or two about supporting people. No, but the analogy I was going to give you this, and I was always baffled when my kids were toddlers, and I would think about like how they're like Energizer bunnies that never stop, like they're running around all day, and then at the end of the day they're still running around. Like, where do they get all this energy from? And we as adults sit all day, whether it's in the office or wherever, we're not moving as much. Let's just put it that way. And by the evening, we're done, right? And so I just want to kind of point that out. The reason is because our mental space, where our mind is at, also takes a lot more energy than actually physically running around. And kids don't have a worry, thank God. You know,
We hope.
most children don't, and they're thinking, you know, I just want to go play. And so they're not worrying about how to prepare the meal. And
you see if your kid is worrying, it is going to be affected. It will manifest in their behavior.
Yeah, definitely. And so we have so much on our minds generally as adults, right? Like going to work and all the responsibilities that we have, and taking care of our families. But now there's so much more on our mind, whether it's fear of the future, whether it's figuring out our finances because our jobs were hit really tremendously, whether it's figuring out how to hold our families together because our kids' emotional well-being needs us. And so we have so much more on our minds, so that when we find ourselves sitting around doing nothing, and I find myself sometimes a day will go by and I have to like really think hard about what I accomplished according to my list of what I consider accomplishments. I can't think of anything. And that is okay, because what my energy was being used on is something else altogether. But then we get these messages, right? You know, we get these messages, whether it's on social media or, by the way, emails, forget about it. Almost every email is this course, and come join this course, and come on this course. And, you know, there's something that I subscribe to that has online continuing education for professionals. I had to unsubscribe because I started feeling like it's an opportunity, like all these courses, like I can take them. No. So that's how I was like starting to identify where this toxic positivity was making me feel I should. And
because there are some people, many people, and it will change for who. Every person is going to have different reaction at different time, where receiving those kind of emails is actually going to jazz me up. Like, there were moments during the last 6 weeks where I was like, okay, I'm ready, let's go, let me grow, let me change, let me work. And I was ready for those calls to action. You know, there were moments where I really was. And for some people, you know, learning a new language is going to be nourishing in this time. And for some people, starting a garden is going to be nourishing, and baking sourdough bread is going to be nourishing physically and emotionally. And those are all legitimate. And it's not the call to action. It's not the, it's more of, and it's
the message that now is the time. Now you have all this other extra time. When else is, you know, better than to do this while you're at home, right? Like,
it's the projection of the assumption that you know what's happening with me, and you know that I'm ready for this, and so it must be. Because some days I was like amenable to it, and I was open, and I was like, you know what, I'm inspired by that. Maybe this is something that would be nourishing to me. And some days I was just like, I feel like a failure today. Like, I would scroll down my newsfeed and I'd be like, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I could have done that and I didn't. And then I was like, why am I so tired? Why do I have no energy? I didn't do anything. And then I was just feeling so sad and like embarrassed and kind of like a loser, you know? And so here's the question. This is the detox part. So let's say somebody like me, I'm scrolling down my newsfeed and I see this person is succeeding here and this person is going forward over there, and this person is pitching something new to me, and I'm starting to feel the effects of toxic positivity, which is, again, that people are making me feel like I'm a failure because I'm not thriving, when really my job is to be surviving, right? Because my job is to survive. What can we do about it?
Okay. So I always say, and this is like rule of thumb, awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
If you have awareness, and hopefully this is what this conversation is going to provide our listeners, is just being aware of what messages are toxic for me, what messages are invalidating my actual experience of whatever it is that I'm going through. That awareness is the first step. So if you've got this, or if you now have this, great, you're well on your way. Okay. So that's number one. And as with any detox, if you think about like a body detox, this would say you want to go on a detox juice cleanse or whatever, you're basically eliminating the things that are clogging up your body, and you're being very careful. You're filtering what you're going to allow into your body. And this is what this is the detox of social media, and what channels we are subscribing to, what we are going to allow into our, through our screen, and what we're not. So unfollow, and these positive messages can be good at the right time. So you just have to be aware of, right now is not the time that I want to be hearing this. Right now, I just need to like kind of sit and be, and invite those kind of people into my life that are just going to allow me to be, and to eliminate the information that's coming in with a tremendous amount of toxic positivity that is making you feel invalidated. So those are kind of the first two. The other things that, it's being able to differentiate what is my voice and what is someone else's voice. And so that's built. We built on that. So first, the awareness of what are the messages that are toxic for me, the positive messages that are not good for me. And because oftentimes when we, like you were saying, you start to wonder, like, should I be? And maybe I should be. And I was feeling that too when I was getting those emails, that someone else's voice, we kind of make it our own, especially when we're not really sure, or we're starting to doubt our own experience. And those other voices are quite loud, and they're coming from all over the place. So then we start to think that I shouldn't be, and we start to judge ourselves. So being able to differentiate what's someone else's voice and what's my voice, right? So if I'm feeling uncomfortable, just to be able to listen to that, and to remind ourselves, our world slowed down. Our world is not the same right now, right? And so our expectations of ourselves should also change. If we maintain the same expectation of productivity, the same expectation of, staying positive and rah, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
And it's not realistic, and it's going to take a toll.
If that works for us and if it resonates as true. But if we are feeling stress, then we can do things to work on that, but we shouldn't negate the feeling. We should address the feeling and then work with it and move it to the place that it needs to go. But and
this is something also to address, because I think that and I've had this question from clients before: if I'm going to sit with my sadness, or if I'm going to sit with my negative emotion, then I'm going to feel it more. Like, I don't want to sit there with, I don't want to let it grow. But it's actually the opposite. When we sit with it and we give it a space, it can then be processed. It doesn't grow. It actually grows when we suppress it. When we try to cover it up with toxic positivity, that's when it grows. And so then there's like a dissonance between like what we're saying, or what we're trying to act like, and what we're actually feeling. And that conflict isn't good.
Wow. I think that what you said is really resonating with me, which is that we need to not judge ourselves right now. We need to, like, nobody is intentionally judging. No one is putting these messages out because they want to hurt you or because they're judging you. That's not what's happening. People are inspired. People are trying to make the best of a moment. People are trying to offer each other support. But sometimes,
and also it's not natural. Like, humans aren't wired to just be positive. And I think this is also like the ikar of toxic positivity, because toxic positivity is basically saying we should always try to be positive. And there is a time and space for people to be positive when they come to that on their own terms and at their own time.
Yes.
But we also need to accept that we are not meant to only be positive. We live in a world that's going to allow us to, it's going to cause negative emotions, and we got to accept that.
It's something that
Can't cover them up.
that really spoke to me is that meaning making and finding the silver lining, that comes when a person is ready to come to that point. That doesn't come from unsolicited pressure to feel that way. No one got to, oh, I really understand why this happened to me, or why I'm experiencing this, or I've made meaning from this by someone being like, because, without any kind of internal work. The work has to be, and I like on Layers, we have our anonymous series. And just in general on Layers, I think this is just like a general rule, but in terms of how the readers interact with the women who come on board and talk about their work, their life story and their pain, they listen. There's no advice.
This is why Layers is amazing. This is literally why Layers is amazing, because there's a voice and there's listeners.
And that's it. There's nothing else. There's no commentary. There's no advice given. There's no suggestions being made. There's just, I hear you. I see you. I'm with you. And that is that's the mechanism that heals. That's what helps people make meaning. That's what helps people, move through and move through the pain, move through the stress and the challenges. And so, right now, obviously, it seems like the best we can offer each other is to be with each other. Just be with each other. Listen to your friends. Reach out to your loved ones. But there was one thing that you said that really spoke to me when we spoke about this the other day, about social media specifically, and it being a highlight reel. So this is the last thing that we'll say, because I think that it really just sums up the point. So give us a little bit.
I like analogies. So I'm going to tell you, you're going to a, what do you call it? Like street fair or some kind of artist's gallery. And you're seeing the most amazing art, the most amazing paintings. And you dabble in art. And so automatically, it's just an automatic human thing, is comparison. I'm not that good. Oh, I could never be in this kind of gallery. My art would never be, displayed here. But what the part we're not seeing is how many artists are not showing their art here in this gallery.
And also how many pieces of art that artist threw out before they found the best one to put on display.
And how many works of art that are so fabulous and so amazing in their own way, in their own unique way, that wouldn't be in this gallery because whatever, right? So the people that are so blatantly out there in social media are the ones that are coping or seem to be coping, or they have what to show. And then there's the vast majority that aren't showing you their struggles or what they're what they're battling on a daily basis. So what you're seeing is only what has been put out on that gallery.
Yeah, it's the highlights.
Mm-hmm.
So if you compare yourself and you look, you're in your own mind and you're thinking about the totality of who you are and what you accomplished that day and what space that you're in, and then you see one thing, one photo, one article or one pitch that somebody else is putting out there, and you think to yourself, they really have it so together. Why don't I have it so together? It's not resonant with reality, because this is a highlight reel. Social media is a highlight reel. And I think
going back to Layers, and what you guys do is you shine light on people's struggles in a way that's empowering and beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think that there is, something to be said about that, is just going in the opposite direction and saying, no, real people have real struggles and we're all in this together.
So Layers was born one of the reasons why Layers was born was because I would look on social media and feel like garbage. And I'd be like, why am I the only one who's having a hard time? And then once I just cracked the door open a little bit, all of a sudden it was like a flood of like, no.
Because there was a need for people to see real, right? Reality.
The real.
So, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
For guidance as a clinician and as my friend. And I'm so glad that you were able to share with all of your GHI, the audience of GHI, and all the people watching on Layers Project. And you know what? We just need to be there for each other. And we don't know what the timeline is and the schedule of this, but we know that relationships don't have timelines, and they don't have, we're not, just because we can't see each other in real life, we're still connected. And that's
definitely. And I think just as a message, and I'm sure that I can speak for you when I say that the Layers followers and GHI followers, if you need an ear, we're here for you. Both of these wonderful organizations, magazine, we are here for you.
all right.
No judgment.
We're here for you.
All
right.
Okay, wonderful.
Listening, and we will talk soon.
Okay, this was great. Thank you, Shira.